Another season of Formula 1 passes, and Max Verstappen claims his second World Drivers' Championship at the very rainy Japanese Grand Prix held at Suzuka. While some might say it was a snooze fest with all the waiting during the red flags, the same could be said for Verstappen when he was told he won the World Drivers' Championship in the cooldown room due to some misunderstanding of the points awarded during the shortened race. Much less exciting than when he won his first Driver Championship over the radio. What's even crazier than that was a driver that won a World Drivers' Championship from the grave, Jochen Rindt. Jochen was a German-born driver that raced under the Austrian flag. Growing up, Jochen was an adrenaline-seeking, rebellious kid. He was often a troublemaker and was expelled from multiple different schools. Jochen even said that, "I was always in trouble at school, and once I almost ran down one of my teachers on my motorcycle." He also broke his femoral neck while skiing, and led to one leg being 4 centimeters short that caused a limp whenever he walked. Eventually, he went to England to learn how to drive, but he was too young to obtain a license. But that didn't stop Jochen. Determined, Jochen learned how to drive with an injured leg and a cast, and due to his age, he drove without a license for 18 months before getting caught on the day before he was eligible. During this period, Jochen had 8 misdemeanors with the police. He wasn't exactly off to a great start trying to get his license. Jochen's interest in motorsports grew when he and his friend went to the 1961 German Grand Prix. That friend being the one and only Helmut Marko, former F1 driver and the current head of the Red Bull Driver Development Program. Jochen drove his first race in 1961. After missing the official application deadline to enter the race, because why wouldn't he was eventually allowed to race and drove his grandma's Simca Montheri. And for the cherry on top, he was black flagged and disqualified from the race due to his dangerous and reckless driving. During this time, Jochen was notorious for his hazardous driving, where he would race and overtake medical vehicles on track while other drivers were slowing down. He even almost crashed into the spectators by the side of the track in a race in Budapest. While I did just go on a tangent about how reckless Jochen was, he was a fearless and stellar driver when the car was kept on track. People will often say there are 2 outcomes for Jochen in a race, either crashing or winning the race. Jochen drove all sorts of different cars, and won. He won 8 rally victories in an Alfa Romeo GT 1300 and even won the 1965 24 Hours of Le Mans with Maston Gregory in the Ferrari 250 LM. The team experienced a multitude of problems during the 24 Hours of Le Mans, from failing to restart the engine after pitting and running on only 6 of the 12 cylinders. After falling back in positions after some repairs, Maston and Jochen decided to drive flat out, well aware of the risk from the increased pace. Jochen started his stint at night in P18 and eventually fought his way up into P3 by dawn. The pair drove their hearts out, to the point that Jackie Ickx stated that they had driven like maniacs. Jochen's success was also carried over into open-wheelers, where he won 29 races in Formula 2 and was called King of Formula 2 by the media in the mid to late 1960s. He made his Formula 1 debut at the 1964 Austrian Grand Prix in a one-off race driving the Brabham BT11 for the Rob Walker racing team. It wasn't until next year in 1965 where he got his first permanent seat at Cooper. The car wasn't particularly competitive in 1965, but the year after in 1966, other teams were struggling with the new engine regulations while Cooper seemed to do well with their old V12, supplied by Maserati. With a capable car, Jochen was able to get 3 podiums during the season and finished 3rd in the World Drivers' Championship. Eventually, Jochen's success in Formula 2 was noticed, and he was offered a seat to accompany Graham Hill by Lotus in 1969, effectively as a replacement for Jim Clark, who died in an accident driving for Lotus the previous year. Lotus at this time was notorious for his quick pace, but also for his lack of reliability, where the team had 31 different accidents between 1967 and 1969. Knowing this, Jochen was reluctant to sign the deal, but he eventually agreed to drive for them right before the 1969 Spanish Grand Prix, stating, "At Lotus, I can either be a world champion or die." It was at this very race in Spain where both Graham and Jochen crashed at high speeds when both their wings mounting failed. Both drivers survived, but Jochen was left with a bloody, broken nose and cheekbone. And it wasn't just the drivers who had injuries. During this incident, a marshal broke his foot, and a different marshal lost his eye. Jochen was not particularly happy with the idea of wings, as they were only introduced the year before and teams were still looking at aerodynamics as if it was voodoo magic. Jochen even went on to state in an interview that these wings are insanity in my eyes and should not be allowed on racing cars. Only being able to finish 4 out of the 11 races, Jochen still managed P4 in the Drivers' Championship for the 1969 season. Jochen's performance was much better in the following season in 1970. Lotus had just created the Lotus 72, a car that would pave the road for future engineering designs with the use of a torsion bar suspension, inboard brakes, side-mounted radiators opposed to front-mounted, and a sleek aerodynamic profile. The car had some troubles in the beginning of the season, but after some adjustments, Jochen quickly came up to speed and won 5 races out of the first 8 rounds. His first win of the season was at the 1970 Monaco Grand Prix, where he surpassed Jack Brabham on the final lap, final corner, when Brabham had braked too late. The 10th round of the season was the 1970 Italian Grand Prix held at Monza, a track famous for its long straights, high speed, and low drag. In attempts to compete with the stronger Ferrari engines of Jackie Ickx, whose car was 16 km an hour faster than the Lotus, Jochen decided to go into the practice session with no aerodynamic wings on the car, while his teammate John Miles was reluctant to this decision, stating that the car was unstable and difficult to drive. On the 5th lap of the practice session, Jochen's Lotus experienced failure at the front right brake shaft at Parabolica, the end of a huge straight. It was suspected that the car was capable of achieving 205 miles per hour with the wingless configuration. The car swung left and right under the uneven braking, and Jochen eventually crashed into the barrier. During this period, Jochen often only used 4 points out of the 5-point harness, leaving the cross strap unbuckled so he would be able to egress the car quickly in the event of a fire. However, upon impact with the barrier, Jochen submarined in his harness without his cross strap, leading to fatal injuries in his neck. Jochen was pronounced dead before he reached the hospital. As for the rest of the season, Jochen had a huge lead in the Drivers' Championship, and no one else was able to surpass his points, making him the only driver to receive the World Drivers' Championship posthumously. At the end of the season, Jackie Stewart handed the World Drivers' Championship trophy to Jochen's wife, Nina Lincoln. During this time, people often criticized Jochen for being crazy, intimidating, and even in some cases, arrogant. But some may argue that these are some of the traits that top drivers need in order to come out first out of the rest of the grid. Jochen understood the risks of Formula 1, but there was never a single doubt that racing was what he wanted to do. And in his words, "Maybe I will not live to the age of 40, but until that time, I will have experienced more things in life than anybody else." Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, consider subscribing and checking out some of my other videos, like why Kimi Räikkönen had blue hands during this race, or how I bet won Nigel Mansell a world championship.